Hello, darlings. What's going on? Welcome. I am Shauna Renee, and this is Coco Mode 2.0. We are moving the party from SiriusXM. Well, we moved the party from SiriusXM about 7 years ago, but we are moving it to YouTube, where you and I are going to connect every Thursday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time to just kind of, talk about the things that are important to us. Do some deep dives into the way things have changed since the last time we had an opportunity to talk on a regular basis, and also the way things that have stayed the same. So much has changed for me. I walked away from the original Coco Mill back in 2014, and we are in 2022 now. And honey, so much has happened since then. I can't wait to catch you up on it. But I will tell you this, there's one thing that has not changed, and that is my care and concern for my folks. Now, you may remember that during the intro to the show back in the day, there was I used to repeat this West African quote that said, "The ruin of a nation begins in the home of its family." And I stood by that. That was the foundation of all of the work that I was doing, was not about the ruin of the nation so much, but just kind of flipping that and turning it on its head and saying that the success of a nation will begin in the home of its family, of its people. And so for me, that meant that I had to create a space for us to heal. I had to create a space for us to talk and communicate. I had to create a space for us to look at different perspectives of things that maybe we had been taught by our parents and our grandparents that might not necessarily apply to the modern age. We're learning, we're growing, we're shedding generational trauma. So let's kind of look at what that would look like. And so we were doing that work back then. And let me tell you, these young people now, honey, they have taken it to the next step. So I'm here as your Generation X guide, showing you a little bit of how the younger people are moving, the ways that they're thinking about things. And then also for the younger viewers, the folks who may not have been with me back then, I'm here to just give you a little bit of advice. Not all of the things that your parents tell you are wrong. Not all of the things that your auntie shares with you are incorrect. Some of the things you can take and actually apply to your life as it is. So that's really what this is all about. Now, you are watching this show. This is pre-recorded, and that is because this is the 8th of September, and it is the day that we heard the Queen Elizabeth II, passed away. And because of some of the other jobs that I have, I was afraid that I might be called away to do something else. And I didn't want to interrupt the live show if, in fact, that happens. Okay, so that's where we are with that. Now, we're going to get started. Actually, I'm going to take these headphones off because I don't need them. I know I sound good. And we are going to get started. Okay, we're going to get started. So I want to take you back. Now, I want you to give me a little bit of time. Just be with me, because it's going to take me a minute to get back up to where, we can continue this conversation. But I want you, especially if you are, let's say, 35 years old or older, I want you to think back to 2009, 2010. Okay, back in the day, the good old days. You may remember that it was around that time the mainstream media got a hold to and ran with this story about the 70% of Black women who were unmarried and the 40% of Black women who were never, ever, ever going to get married. I'm not sure where these statistics came from. Maybe there was a study that had been released, but when I tell you CNN, Newsweek, Time Magazine, ABC, CBS, NBC, they all ran with this story. I remember, would gather all of these young professional Black women together, and they would do these town hall style shows. And it was just a mess. And it was all in an attempt to scare Black women, because we later found out that Black women's fears of being alone they were very lucrative to certain folks. But we'll get to that in a moment. I want to, though, remind you of an ABC Nightline piece that was done in 2009, I believe. And this was the first that I'd heard about this study. And they were not only reporting this 70% of Black women are single, but they were trying to figure out why that was. So what they determined was the main reason was because there were 1.8 million more Black men than Black women. So that was like the main reason. So even if every Black woman had married a Black man, 12% of Black women were going to be single if they wanted to marry Black men. Then they said, and if you then subtract for the number of Black men who are not educated, who do not have a high school diploma or better, and you subtract for the number of Black men who are not employed or not who are not well employed, and then you subtract for, you know where I'm going, the number of Black men who are incarcerated. Well, honey, you'd be lucky to get a Black man to even walk past you, never mind look at you and want to marry you. But for those of you who are still going to hold out hope, we're going to call in a relationship guru to give you some advice on what you can do to maybe snag one of these Black men. You may have heard of him. He's a comedian. He is also a talk show host. His name is Steve Harvey. And he's written this book called, what was it? Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man. Y'all remember this. And then, of course, Steve Harvey gets on the television show. He says, well, part of the problem, and I'm not saying that y'all should, just go with any old guy, but a big part of the problem is that your standards are too high. Maybe you can't have the man that makes a whole lot of money. Maybe you got to just go ahead and look at the man who is picking up your trash every day. It ain't nothing wrong with him. He's a hardworking man. He could be a good man, So there was. It was the beginning of what became, again, a very lucrative industry. This telling Black women that the reason that they're single is because their standards are too high. They were writing books about it. They were doing television shows about it. They were on morning shows being interviewed about it. I remember this vividly because I had a bookshelf next to my desk at that time, and it had 5 shelves, and 3 of those shelves were full of books that had been written by Black men calling themselves some kind of relationship guru, relationship experts, when in reality, they were just like regular men who had dated a woman and it didn't go well. And they decided that the reason it didn't go well wasn't because of them, but it was because Black women just don't know a good man when they see one. No, for real. That's what they were saying. There was a book called The Denzel Principle. And I remember receiving this book, and I actually paid attention to this book because this book was actually written by the husband of someone that I knew. And so I went and I read the media kit, and there was a quote from this guy. His name was Jimmy Israel. There was a quote from this guy, and it said, and I'm reading this quote: "Sisters decry the shortage of good men and say there's no way she is settling for less than a good Black man. She, of course, he writes, has no idea what that means. She, of course, has no idea what it means to be a good Black man. She has no idea what she wants or what a good Black man truly looks like. She thinks that good Black men only come in packages that I guess look like Denzel." That's why the book was called The Denzel Principle. Right? So Black women were being told, you've got to lower your standards. Who cares if you're attracted to him? Fake it. Because, The pretty boys are no good anyway. You got to be with us. The less attractive men will treat you right. Or, you got to be with us. The men who aren't making a whole lot of money and really can't do much for you, but we'll be here. Our presence should be enough. You gotta hang out and want to be with us. The ones who, we don't have a whole lot of education. We don't have a whole lot of experience, but there's potential, girl. And so that's what women did. That's exactly what they did. They said, okay, well, if this is the only way that I'm going to get married, and well, I really want to be married because, I've been told by my mother that I should get married, or by society that, my value is really determined by whether or not I'm coupled. Forget about the degrees and all that other stuff. In fact, there was a book called Your Degrees Won't Keep You Warm at Night. The Very Smart Brothers wrote that one. I remember I interviewed them on Kokomo. Your degrees won't keep you warm at night. So forget about your degrees. Forget about, your accomplishments. Forget about all that hard work, honey. You just need a man next to you. That's what'll make you happy. That's what'll make people respect you. So that's what these women did. That's what they did. They got these guys and they put on Beyonce and, and they decided to upgrade. They're going to upgrade them. And for some women, this worked out really well. Let me be very honest with you. I knew some women who found men who, maybe a year or two beforehand, they wouldn't have paid any attention to. And these turned out to be great guys who love them to no end. You know what I mean? Just and they were able to create a life for themselves where everybody felt taken care of. Everyone felt respected. Everyone felt adored and cherished. It was a beautiful thing to see. And a lot of those people are still together to this day. But I also know a lot of women who went on and upgraded the dudes. And then after a while was like, I can't do this because this isn't really what I want. That in fact, I do know what I want. And this ain't it. You know what I mean? I do want to be attracted to the man that I'm with. That's important to me, to be physically attracted, because that's kind of how women work. And if I'm not physically attracted to you, then there's got to be something else there that makes me want to be close to you, that creates, an environment or a situation where that oxytocin is released and I feel good. Or there were women who were saying, it's okay that I guess I'm not attracted to you, but your issues, there's too much. You got too much childhood trauma that you have yet to work through, and you're mean, and your emotions are unregulated, and your emotional intelligence is like really low, and your communication abilities are inferior, and I just can't take it anymore. So they would leave. They were just like, I can't do this anymore. I remember a lot of women doing that. Hell, I did it a couple of times during that time. Like, I can't do this. This is, I guess I'll just be single. All right, follow me. I'm going somewhere with this. You also at that time had the young girls, the teenagers, the ones who were in their very early 20s, watching their sisters and their aunts and their mothers going through this back in 2009, 2010. Now, those young girls are now in their 20s. They're in their 20s. And they have decided, based on what they saw, that lowering their standards is not the key to happiness. In fact, relationships, marriage really isn't necessarily the key to happiness. These young girls, these really young millennials and what they call the Zoomers, the Generation Zs, our children, baby, they're listening to their grandparents. They're listening to their grandmothers say, please, please, please don't get married early. Please, 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 please go out and travel and live your life and do your thing before you get married. Please, please, please make sure that the man that you marry is not suffering from some kind of trauma, because he will make your life a living hell, honey, because your granddaddy made mine. That. They're listening. So they're deciding, instead of getting married or of lowering their standards just for the sake of having a warm body next to them in the bed because their degrees don't keep them warm, to travel. They're on Instagram telling you about their trips to South Africa and Bali, and they're hanging out in Ghana, and they're down in Tulum. Shoot, half of them moved down to Mexico. They're living their best lives, working remotely in their 6-figure jobs. You know, they've got these groups of girlfriends who are there to support them. And yes, honey, they're taking a lover or two, but they are not in relationships. In fact, I saw something on social media the other day, man, that just, I felt it like right here. It was a video about these single women, these young single women. It said, these women are not looking for their soulmates because, and I'm paraphrasing here, but I think he said, because their whole lives serve their souls. What does that feel like? Your whole life serves your soul. Babe, hold on for a second, child. Whew, child. Now, if that's the way these young women are looking at life, brothers, y'all might have to step it up. It might get a little lonely for you because they ain't checking for you like that right now. And in fact, earlier in August, a man by the name of Greg Matos, he's a clinical psychologist, wrote a story for Psychology Today saying that exact same thing. He wrote a story called The Rise of Lonely Single Men. Now, he was talking about men in general, but as you know, whatever is happening sort of, in mainstream culture tends to affect our culture even more so. And he essentially is saying that there has been a rise in lonely single men for a few reasons. One, that women are taking themselves out of the dating pool. They're not putting themselves out there anymore. And he knows this because there are far fewer women on online dating sites than there have ever been. And I know for a fact this is the case for Black women because Black women weren't having much success on these dating sites anyway. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, he said that there are upwards of 62% of the users on these dating sites are men. And so the women who are on the dating sites now can be picky. They can be more choosy maybe than before. They can say, no, no, no. And of course, when you are initially connecting with these people on these dating app sites, it's all about the visual, what they look like, right? So there goes that whole, you shouldn't care what the guy looks like. That's thrown out of the window. The other thing was that women's relationship standards were changing. They were increasing. That women were now saying, and I'm reading from the article, that they prefer men who are emotionally available, who are good communicators, and also share their values. Now, let me just stop here for a moment and say that this story was based on his experiences. He has like a TikTok show, I think. So there's no empirical data here, but still, these were his experiences. And I can speak to you from my experiences that, yeah, this is pretty much what's going on with young Black women, especially. And then here was something, and I want to read his exact words here. He says that there's skill deficits, and that for men, this means a relationship skills gap that, if not addressed, will likely lead to fewer dating opportunities and longer periods of being single. There's less patience for poor communication skills today. The problem for men is the emotional connection is the lifeblood of healthy long-term love, and it requires all of the skills that families still are not consistently teaching young boys. Young boys are not being taught the skills that are necessary to build healthy relationships and thus healthy families and thus healthy communities. And this is becoming a problem. And what he is seeing now is that women are no longer thinking about upgrading a dude or dealing with it or helping him through his issues. They're just like, nah, that was your mama's job. That was your daddy's job. And if they didn't do it, I'm not interested. And so here you have now this man saying that younger and middle-aged men are the loneliest that they've ever been, and it's only going to get worse. And this article made its rounds, baby. This article, now here we are in 2022. This article made the rounds the same way that article about black women made the rounds back in 2009, 2010. My, how things have changed, right? So I'm seeing this article on Facebook. A couple of my girlfriends are posting this article on Facebook. I'm seeing it on Instagram. And then I see it on Twitter. Now, let me tell y'all something. Twitter these days is my social media platform of choice. If you're looking for me, well, no, I'm not going to give you my Twitter address just yet. I'll give it to you in a little bit. Not today, but I'm on Twitter. TikTok, I'm sorry. TikTok. Not Twitter, TikTok. So it makes its way to TikTok, my bad. And a young therapist, young sister who I'm going to say is probably in her late 20s, early 30s, gets a hold of it and she stitches someone else's video. So for those of you who are not familiar with TikTok, stitching something is like it allows you to play a portion of someone else's video and then you can respond to it. So she stitches someone else's video that is referencing this Psychology Today article. And she goes in. Now, she's a therapist, but she has a slightly different approach. Her approach is a little more aggressive. You know what I mean? She regularly uses words like thought and thought, like, you know, I don't know. Again, I know some of y'all don't know. Some of y'all been with me for a long time and y'all are learning. So thought, THOT, stands for that hole over there. So she's using terms like this. She's dancing around and she talks about this article and she says, hey, I am a therapist and I'm telling you right now, I don't see very many men in my practice, but I am out here dating and I'm telling you, these dusty ninjas out here are not trying to do the work necessary for them to create healthy relationships. They just think that they can act any kind of way and that women are going to deal with it. And you know what? It's exhausting. It's painful. And these women out here have decided we don't want to take it anymore. And this is essentially what she said. Now, I'm paraphrasing it. You know, she used some language and I think the way that I said it was probably a little more diplomatic than she did. And the way she said it upset a lot of people. A lot of men were upset because, you know, there's something about these young men. Again, they're not being taught accountability by their parents. They're not being taught emotional intelligence. They're not being taught communication skills by their parents. So they don't have them. So they don't even know how to communicate their frustration with her approach in ways that are healthy. And they don't necessarily even want to take accountability for the things that she may have said that were true. So they attack her. And then a woman, a journalist, sees this video because people are talking about it. It's all over the place. It's being shared everywhere. And she writes an article and she names this young lady because this young lady is using a TikTok handle. She's not using her real name. She names this young lady. And then also lists in this article her place of employment. And this young therapist, this young Black female therapist, is fired. Her company fires her because of this video. And it was such a shame because, one, now this young Black woman is out of a job, and now her clients don't have a therapist. Now, there are some folks who are saying, well, she might not have been that good of a therapist anyway, because just look at the way that she talks. Look at the way that she acts. Look at the kinds of things that she says. But let me tell you something. Not everybody needs the kind of therapist that's going to ask, so, what's going on today? Let's talk about this. How does that make you feel? Some people need that. That's good for some people. There's some people out here who like, they like a more like scholarly or academic approach. They need their therapist to talk to them about psychological theories. And then you got people like me who need a therapist to just tell it like it is. Let me tell y'all a story. This is just not even a whole story, a little anecdote. Several years ago, this was maybe around 2014, 15, I ended this relationship. And baby, when I tell you I was so angry at this person and the way things went down, I was afraid I was going to hurt somebody. Like, my Leo came out full on. I was like, I'm about to be a problem because I'm so pissed about the way this thing went down. And I need to get some help before I go to jail. So I go to a therapist. I find a therapist. She's an older woman. She's in her 60s, I think. Late 50s or early 60s, which is what I needed at the time. At the time, I was in my 30s. I needed someone older. All of my therapists, my mentors, I like an older woman. I like an elder because I want somebody that has a little bit of life experience on me, right? So she's an older woman, and I go to her, and we start off the way most therapy sessions start, the first day. So why are you here? What's going on? Well, I'm just having some trouble because, anger issues, and I just want somebody who might be able to help me with it. And she's like, oh, okay, well, why are you so angry? Well, I was in this relationship and it didn't go well. So we do this song and dance like for about 3 sessions. And about the 4th session, I say something. I don't remember what it is, but I remember she closed her book. She scooted her chair closer to me. She looked me in my face and she said, Shauna, cut the shit. What's going on? What's the problem here? Like, for real, what's happening? And from that day forward, I knew that this was going to be the woman that was going to get me out of my funk. This was going to be the woman who was going to save my life, because this woman right here was not going to allow me. She was not going to allow me to bullshit her. You understand? She was going to tell me like it is, and she was going to give it to me plain. That's what I needed. And so I feel bad for this young lady's clients, because clearly that's what they need. And there aren't very many therapists out there like that, because all the rest of them are like, oh, okay, let's just talk about it. They needed that approach. And I hope that eventually she ends up getting her own practice, that she gets back to helping people. And I was really, actually, I'll be honest with you, there were a couple of people who were kind of in my circle, and there was a lot of discussion about her on other social media platforms. And I was really surprised by the number of folks who I knew, a lot of them in therapy who didn't understand why her approach was necessary for some folks. But I digress. No matter how she said it, what she said was so important. And this is kind of really where I want to end this today. I said all of that to say that it is becoming increasingly important that we begin working with our young men. I am the mother of a 16-year-old boy, and I talk to him all the time about his future. I talk to him all the time about his wife, his children. We talk about it. Well, what kind of dad are you going to be? What kind of, husband? And I mean, he's young. I don't anticipate him getting married anytime soon, but I'm slowly beginning to introduce the idea to him that now is the time for you to begin thinking about the kind of man that you want to be, because you're creating that man now, because this is the beginning of that. You don't start working on being a good man when you hit 30. You start working at it as a young man, and then life happens and you have a challenge here, and you grow and you develop, and experiences here, and you grow and you develop. And by the time you get to be 30 or 35 years old and you're ready to settle down, you've had 20 years, or okay, well, I'm sorry, maybe 15, 20 years to work on it. You've had a whole range of experiences that haven't just happened to you, but they are part of, you've integrated them into your life, into your personality. Those experiences became lessons and tools that you can use to become the kind of man that will attract the kind of woman who will be good for you and who you will be good for. The two of you can work together. The two of you can do some stuff. The two of you can create something beneficial for yourselves, for your family, and your community. You're not driving her crazy because you're emotionally immature and unable to communicate and unable to process your emotions. And because you are not that, you are not going to be choosing a woman who is also emotionally immature, unable to process her emotions, and a mess and all over the place. Who you attract who you are. So I'm teaching him now to become that person. And what I realize is that there are limitations to that for me as his mother. Not because I'm a woman, because I don't buy into that. A woman can't teach a boy how to be a man. I don't buy into that. I mean, a lot of men out here can't teach a boy how to be a man because they don't know themselves, because nobody taught them, because their dads didn't know the first thing about being men. But what I do know is that I am coming to him also with my own shit, with my own trauma, with my own stuff. And so it is better for me then to involve a professional in this process. So there becomes a point there's a point in his life then where I know that it's time for him maybe to go to therapy as a young man, so that he can get the tools that he needs to deal with certain kind of things, like his anger, like his frustration. Like, my son is, he can be emotional sometimes, you know what I mean? So learning to deal with his emotions, not by swallowing them, not by transmuting every emotion that he has into anger and then by acting out, but by actually gaining tools and insight and information and knowledge and wisdom on how to manage them. These are the things that we need to begin to do for our young men. And these are the things that we also must encourage our older men to do, because it is never too late. I don't buy into that either. I can tell you from personal experience that it's never too late. That if a man truly wants to be better, that he will indeed be better. But I will say this to you. It has also been my experience, and this goes for men and women, but I can only speak, as a woman who is in relationship with a man. And that is that shift, that change, that growth must be preceded by accountability. You understand what I'm saying? They have to first be held accountable. We all must first be held accountable for our actions. And then from there, when we see that there are consequences we begin to start thinking about, all right, well, what can I do to make sure that I'm able to save my relationship, that I'm able to save my family, that I'm able to save my life? See, back in the day, right? Remember back in the day, we talked about it when women were being told that they should lower their standards, that they shouldn't, that they should not expect to be in relationship with men who have already figured it out. Like, they should just be happy that the man is there. Well, what that did for a lot of women, what a lot of women did as a result of that, I should say, is that they began to be, they developed a fear of holding the person accountable. They developed a fear of confrontation. They started to betray themselves and who they were just to have somebody by their side. We all did it. So I'm not going to sit here and act like, I never did it. Of course, we all did it because we were all being taught at that time. In 2009, I was 2009. How was I? Was in my 30s, So in 2009, I was being socialized to believe that a man's presence was enough, and that anything else that came with it, good or bad, I just had to deal with. Good, I was lucky. Bad, I just had to deal with. I'm telling you, it's different now. These young women are not doing this. And what is going to happen for brothers, you young brothers and you middle-aged brothers, some of you older brothers, I'm going to get to you in a minute, but for you young brothers and you middle-aged brothers, what's going to happen is that these women, they're not going to come back. They're not going to change their mind. They're not going to go back and say, you know what, I was wrong. I mean, really, who cares about communication skills? Who cares about emotional intelligence? Who cares about mental health? Who cares about unresolved trauma? Forget about it. Bring all your mess. Let's just go be together and have babies. And it's never going to happen. And let me also say this, because I'm not here to bash the brothers at all. In fact, again, this is exactly the opposite. I'm here to say that the women are trying, they're doing their work. There are so many opportunities for women to do work. We're sister circling and book clubbing and, and resort going. Like, we're doing all this work. We're sitting around talking to each other about it. We're on social media helping each other through. But those opportunities are not there for men. And they need to be there for you. And so I'm saying, like, if you, I want you to be better. I want my son to be better. Because I want my grandson to be better. Because I hope that eventually my great, great, great grandson is better than my great, great, great grandfather was. And of course, I'll also speak to the young women in my life. I have a goddaughter. I have nieces. So yes, of course, I'm talking to them. But again, that work is already being done. There's space and time and opportunity for that. So I don't want you brothers to think that just because me or any other sister is saying to you, yes, y'all need to get some help. Yes, y'all need therapy. Yes, y'all need to do this work. That we're saying it because we're bashing you, or we're saying it because we don't respect you, or our intentions are not pure. They absolutely are. Because we would prefer to be in partnership with you. We would prefer, those of us who are, interested in heterosexual relationships, because again, I understand that everyone is not the same, and I respect everyone's decision to live how they want. But for those of us Black women who are interested in being in relationship with Black men, we would prefer that you be healthy and whole and well. And the healthier you are, the happier you are, the better we will all be. And trust me when I tell you, when you're happy, whole, and healed, fellas, you don't have to worry about women taking advantage of you. You're not going to have to worry about women not treating you well, because you're not even going to attract those kind of women. And if you do attract those kind of women, you're going to be so smart. You're going to be so tapped in that you won't even look their way. You're going to be like, girl, bye. I don't care how cute you. Well, maybe men don't say that. You're going to be like, ma'am, I don't think so. Well, however men do it. I know a man's not going to be like, girl, bye, but maybe they will. But you're going to be like, nah, I'm good. I'm good. I don't even want that. That looked like trouble right there. I'm not interested. So, yeah. Therapy, it's important. I'm just looking at my notes real quick, make sure I got everything. I'm running out of time. So I'm not going to be able to get into this. We're going to talk about something next week. We're going to continue this relationship discussion next week. Can you see this? Hold on. This is such a good book. I read this book recently. I belong to a book club. I'll tell you more about that in the coming weeks, but I belong to a book club and we read this book this year. And it was maybe the third time that I read this book, and it's called The Spirit of Intimacy, Ancient African Teachings in the Ways of Relationships. And once you start to look way back at how relationships were viewed and how people were brought together and what was important, it sort of creates an opportunity for us in modern days to reevaluate what we think we know, shift our perspective slightly, and then begin to build something that is more useful to ourselves, our families, and our community, because these are ways that have been proven, right? So I know when we talk about like looking back at relationships, it's always like, well, my grandmama and my granddaddy were married for 50 years and, they loved each other. And I'm like, that might be true, but let's just keep it real. My grandmother married my grandfather probably in 1948, 47, 48. My grandmother, up until the 70s, wasn't even allowed to own her own home. She wasn't even allowed to get a bank account. So I'm not saying that they wouldn't have stayed together. I'm just using this as an example because I think a lot of young women don't realize that a lot of young men don't realize that a woman couldn't even get her own bank account back in the 1960s. So she couldn't even buy a house without a man on the mortgage. So of course she stayed in her relationship. Of course they stayed together. She didn't have a choice. She just dealt with it. He dealt with it. So I don't think, but again, and also remember, they're coming up in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. Think about how traumatizing life is, how much trauma there is. How much trauma that our grandparents and great-grandparents had to endure coming up in America as Black people at that time. And how that trauma manifested itself, how it showed up in relationships. I don't think it was all that we like to think it is. That's why, when I hear men be like, well, how come women don't do this? Like my grandmother did this. I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. Because number one, your grandmother's not telling you the truth. But I'll tell you what, your grandmother is telling your sister the truth. Your grandmother's telling your daughter the truth. And that's why she's like, yeah, no, I'm good on that. Okay, so I'm all over the place now. I do need to go. Thank you so much for joining me this week. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. I cannot wait to continue this conversation next week. Please do not forget that we will be here on YouTube every Thursday at 9:30 p.m. Okay, 9:30 p.m. I'll be here live, and it'll also give you an opportunity to communicate with me. Please like this. Please share this. Please tell all of your friends about it. Make sure you mark your calendars. Just get your phone, put it in your Google Calendar or whatever else, and yeah. Take care of yourselves, okay? And really, truly, and I mean this, it's so important. Make sure you take care of each other, okay? Peace.